This officer is dead. Why? Very simply, he wasn't prepared.
Hello and welcome back once again to Sovereign Citizens 101, the educational, informational home study course. In tape number 1, we learned how to deal with the police as well as the judicial system. In tape number 2, we learned about financial freedom and how to use our birth certificate and social security number to pay every and all debts we have. But it's one thing to have the information, it's another to live it. And in tape number 3, we're going to be looking at a profile in courage. We're going to be studying under the mastership of Winston, Shrout. Mr. Shrout, a worldwide recognized speaker on sovereign citizenship and self-made businessman who offers solutions in commerce, a private lecturing tour, and online educational series, has dedicated himself to living the dream. And I think that's a life you and I both can agree we all want to participate in. So join me on this journey into learning how to live the best life, how to live the free life, how to live as a sovereign citizen.
The only reason why anybody is in jail is because they didn't pay their debt. So if you take the court case, the order, whatever it is, accept it for value, return it back to the party, which would be the clerk of the court, and the clerk of the court does not supply a check for your endorsement, they are in default, they're in dishonor.
So we're going to accept it for value and do all these things to it, but then we're going to charge it to the party that created the bill. Because once it's charged, now the interest could be returned to the principal and you get a zero balance.
Because this paper process of affidavits and liens and all this kind of stuff, this is a substitute for the dueling field. Any of you ever fought a duel?
We used to get presentments from the IRS, and they wouldn't send the check. And so we used to write back to them and say, thank you very much for what you sent to me, but you didn't send me the check. Well, after a period of time, they started sending the check. They do. Yeah, it's on there. All right. Do you doubt my word? Who said that, huh? When somebody sends you a piece of paper, they got numbers on it, names and all that kind of stuff going on, and you accept it, it turns that piece of paper into currency.
Well, those are some important pieces of information. The only reason people go to jail is because they didn't pay their debt. All bills that exist, all debts that exist, the financial system itself is merely a proxy for dueling. And let's not forget, last but not least, if you receive a notification that you owe a debt, they need to give you the money to give to them. How are you supposed to pay a bill if you don't have the money to pay it? Now try not to be overwhelmed with this new world of financial freedom. Luckily, Winston Shrout offers courses for you to get this information and to absorb it for a nominal fee. You can become a member of his website and study under the master. With a legal expert like Winston Shrout, that's money well spent.
Again, I very seldom ever look in what you call the law books. I look and see what's happening. I look and see what's going on. And that's what I base what I do on. Not so much what's written in statutes and codes.
So adding on to what he shared, then we don't need to do our declaratory judgment. We don't have all this prep work to do prior to doing acceptance for value.
Anybody on the street down here can do this. Anybody on the street, go find them. Anybody can do this.
And then we'll accept it.
You already accepted. You did the acceptance. It's your signature that creates the faith and confidence in this thing.
We just did this for a traffic ticket. We didn't do the deposit thing, and we didn't get it back from the city because he had one from the city too. Haven't heard anything back from them, but we did this type of thing. And what we got back from, no, I guess it was a city attorney. The city attorney sent the ticket back.
But Jim, I hear you asking, that's all well and good if you want to pay a parking ticket or have the DA send the charges back to you. But what about the more in-depth information? I'm not just looking to pay off a credit card or a delinquent bank account.
Now, this is the illusion. This is the illusion. Because the birth certificate is not a birth certificate, it's a death certificate. That's what it is. How do we know it's a death certificate? Because it's a tombstone. How do we know it's a tombstone? Because if you look on the birth certificate, what's it going to have? It's going to have John Doe on there. If you go out to the cemetery and look on the tombstone, what's it going to have on there? So that's why we say that the birth certificate itself is the death certificate, because the entity on the birth certificate is the same entity that's on the tombstone.
When a child is brought into this world and breathes the breath of life, the mother delivers the baby into the state official's hands, who is known as a medical doctor. Following that delivery, an application is filled out by the mother, wherein she makes an application for a live birth. And so that application for a birth is the entrance of the baby into the Admiralty.
All of these, all capital letter acronyms or names, as it were, are all the same party. In other words, this entity right here is the same as the United States is the same as IBM is the same as Safeway or wherever you shop for your groceries. So they're all joined at the hip. They're all the same party. And so what's done to one is done to all.
That's right. Your baby is an admiral, and his birth certificate is really a tombstone. Luckily, all names are interchangeable with one another, and so we all live in a graveyard. And so your baby admiral, IBM, is sailing the land sea of the country, which he also is, because baby admiral equals the United States. And as our sovereign citizen legal expert, Winston Shrout, has pointed out, how can you violate yourself? You can't. You owe no debts to anyone. You're accountable to no laws, because you in fact are the law, the instrument of the law, and the enforcement of it. But these sorts of high-level concepts can be difficult to comprehend, especially if you're stuck in a third-dimensional mindset.
So you had a little bit of exposure already to some of these other dimensional thinkings and so forth. So I thought I'd proceed today with a continuation of that thought process.
Look, folks, if you can ever get out of the third dimension, get into the fourth dimensional thinking, you'll realize that all this stuff we do is silly. I've basically been a fourth dimensional thinker for as long as I can remember. I can't remember being a third dimensional thinker.
For instance, when I lecture, do something like that, I'm speaking from a fourth, fifth, or sixth dimensional level, and then the people hear it at whatever position they are, and then as they listen to it more and more and more and more, then they start to...
Here's a piece of paper. Look here. Here's a piece of paper. Looks pretty big, don't it, until you put it this way. Now you say, well, there's not much to that. You start to, now, so this is a two-dimensional thing here. So, it's got all kinds of things on here, that describe some concept. And so anyway, this is basically a third-dimensional concept. Now, how do we take this into the third dimension? For instance, people say, well, I just did accept it for value. I sent it off over here to the bank, ABC Bank, all that kind of stuff. And they didn't do nothing about it. And I said, yeah, well, did you call them? Did you talk to them about it? That kind of thing. And so again, what you sent them was in the second dimension. It's not even third dimension what you did. See? So you're sending them second dimension stuff, expecting third dimension results. And so perhaps when you start talking about third dimensional, at least in respect to these, then you need to start talking about talk, which is actually sonic. And so to get the results that we want, sometimes we have to go and talk about it. So you can talk about it. So now you can start to inject energy through sonic transmission. I have a friend who's a natural healer, very, very successful at it. And one of the techniques that he uses is called toning. He will actually vocally emit sonic vibrations at a certain frequency. I mean, he'll just, the last time he did it to me, man, the hair on my arms was standing up and I was doing this here.
See how simple it is when you really think about it? By using your sonic force, your supernatural vocalizations, you can turn that two-dimensional object into a three-dimensional concept with your fourth-dimensional thinking. And if you study and practice hard enough, one day you'll truly ascend to the fifth or sixth dimension. It truly takes a special sort of person to truly believe this, to not let themselves be held back by petty concepts like reality.
All right. As I had mentioned, we went and did that seminar in London in 2009, and prior to that time, I had been emailing with a lady who lived in England, who was in fact the Queen of the Fairies, and she's an incarnate fairy.
So I'll just launch right into it. It has to do with what we would call the dark cabals or Illuminatis. Or
over a period of time, we developed a friendship, and then she opened up to me and demonstrated that she's also a very powerful shaman.
But as I studied more and more about mind control and satanic ritual abuse,
and by that time I learned just how powerful she was, because she had demonstrated it to me in several ways. And so I asked her, I said, are you capable of moving the prime meridian over to the Dragon Rose line? Now, the Dragon Rose line is the one that's in that Da Vinci Code movie, Dan Brown and Tom Hanks, they're running around, all that kind of stuff. Okay, so it's not very far over there from there in England.
And what they found out years ago was that if they traumatized a new baby, a new infant.
So I said, can you move that over there? She said, yep. I said, well, move it. She said, okay. And she told me that when she does things on the ether, it generally takes 3 days to materialize in the physical world. So I wasn't expecting anything. But anyway, the next day on Skype, she was hot to get me on Skype. She said, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. I said, what's that? She said, if I hadn't been watching, I wouldn't have seen it. She said, but from about 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 in the afternoon, she said, time stood still.
What better source of knowledge for how to deal with legal situations or paying off debt to the IRS or creditors than Mr. Shrout, ally to the Queen of the Fairies? Not even the dark cabals or the Illuminati can use their mind control satanic magic to prevent you from learning these tips and tricks. Tips and tricks which are available in these affordable DVDs. For just a few $100s a piece, you too can learn all the information necessary to deal with tax debt, credit debt, legal fines, legal fees, and legal trouble. For everything that you're getting for this value, I guess you could say these prices are out of this world.
What commercial interaction might go on between Earth people and visitors from the far reaches of space? Probably about 10 or 11 years ago, I made an acquaintance of a man who, as it turns out, is a Pleiadian. Now, he is not a Pleiadian soul who has incarnated in a typical Earth body, but he told me that his family had been on this planet for 13 generations.
I had planned to go up and visit with James up at the ranch there at East City. And so as I was getting prepared to go, I kept feeling all these rumblings. And I thought at first it was an earthquake coming, and then no earthquake hit. So I thought, well, I don't know what that was all about. But as it turned out, there was apparently a bunch of the reptilians and so forth. They were trying to make a run for it, trying to get off the planet. And the rumblings were the Pleiadians shooting their ships down.
There's another trusted friend of mine revealed that he was visited since 2009 by 3 Pleiadians right in his front room.
And so I understood there was about like 1,000 ships that were destroyed in that effort, which was a major thing. As I mentioned, Tolek and Simon and some of those others had reported that there were only like 120 reptilians left on the planet. Most of them got blasted out of the air by the Pleiadians. So the Pleiadians are having a major, and these are fifth dimensional Pleiadians, as I understand it.
And it appears that the messages from the ETs, some perhaps from Pleiades, some from Andromeda, Sirius, and so forth, are spoken from a higher dimensional thought process. So many of the things which have come, for instance, seem to demonstrate a fourth dimensional logic and reasoning. And then another one of my friends, the ex-CIA sort of fellow, told me that he used to go down to Peru to interact with the Pleiadians who land there on a continual basis. And I have to say we do have help from external sources. Some like to say ET, some like to say angels, some talk about prophets or ascended masters or a whole host of entities. Anyway, another acquaintance that I had made, actually a native man from the Northern Utes up in northern Utah, had told me about little men who fly around up there on flying discs, gathering up radioactive materials in the mountains up there. And we also had other ambassadors who have come on this planet from Venus. And another friend of mine told me about a visitor who had come into her home from inside the hollow earth. Apparently she was very tall, or he was very tall, but luckily the house she lives in has a 10-foot high ceiling.
Actually, in one of my previous existences, I was in fact a fifth dimensional Pleiadian. And so I kind of have that in my blood, which I have to work on because I have to get my mindset out of that in order to function in more of a spiritual way than I had when I was out blasting Pleiadians. And
it's in galaxies and heck, maybe even from the whole universe. Our message to our space friends and family, to the extraterrestrials, to the ascended masters and other interdimensional beings is, come on down.
Winston Shrout, the man, the myth, the legend, fourth dimensional thinking, reincarnated fifth dimensional Pleiadian, ally to the Queen of the Fairies, and staunch opponent to the satanic dark cabal known as the Illuminati. Is it any wonder, with such powerful insights coming from such a important figure within the sovereign citizen movement, that the government needed to step in and try to squash the free man, to shackle him, bind him, and make him fettered once more? I'm sure you've all seen the fake news in the Oregonian, citing that Winston Shrout has been arrested and tried for selling upwards of 100 trillion fake dollars to his gullible followers, refusing to pay income taxes, and hosting private seminars which facilitated other people engaging in illegal activities. You may even have seen the follow-up headline saying that he is currently fleeing from the law, out on the lam, hidden in the wilds. Why, those very same fake news sources even went as far as to bribe his defense attorney and have him give a statement that his client was innocent because he is a literal fucking retard, and he didn't know better about what he was doing. Well, I ask you, who knows better? The United States government, its judicial system, and its civil courts, or Winston Shrout and his friends, the Pleiadians?
I think this whole thing, the information I'm getting from, how shall I say, the star people or the people on the other side, is that this whole thing would be wrapped up very close to May the 1st anyway. And so it's things are good, put it that way.